Hi, I'm Kettisha Walker of Kettisha Walker Realty. I am your host, coach, narrator for this program. I am very excited to be here with you to share this great information with you to add to your real estate tool bags. So I hope you have your pen and your pads ready. Today we're going to talk about real estate professionals, who they are and what their roles are in a real estate transaction. We're going to talk about buyers, sellers, client prospecting, and the real estate code of ethics. So without further ado, let's get started. The who's who in a real estate transaction. Who are the professionals involved in a real estate transaction? On the buyer's side, you have the buyer's agent, the buyer's attorney, and financing professionals. The buyer's agent. The buyer's agent is the individual who, by contract, protects the best interest of the buyer. The buyer's agent shows the buyer properties. They submit offers on the buyer's behalf. In addition to that, they keep the buyer in the loop of any information pertinent to the transaction to ensure that the buyer's needs are being met and their interest is being protected. The buyer's attorney, similar to the buyer's agent, also works for the best interest of the buyer client, but from a legal standpoint. The reason why I point out a legal standpoint is because we want to make sure that if there's any questions about contracts or anything legal, that as agents we are not answering those questions. We're not authorized or are we licensed to give legal advice. So anything outside of the scope of real estate, we are to refer those buyer clients to either the attorney or the home inspector or whoever the professional is responsible for that area of expertise. We want to be very clear about that. Financing professionals. The financing professionals can be anywhere from the loan officer, the mortgage broker, the mortgage lender, basically anybody involved with the financing of the subject property. That's who the financing professionals are in a real estate transaction. On the seller side, we have sellers agents, we have sellers attorneys who, like the buyer side, protect their clients' best interest in the same manner. So if you're working with sellers instead of buyers, the responsibility is the same, but instead it's to the seller instead of the buyer, of course. We have individuals like the appraiser, the home inspector, an insurance agent, sometimes surveyors, title company, and sometimes even transaction brokers. So who are these folks and what roles do they play? They're not really on either side, but they do have clients, and we're going to talk about what their role is to their client. The appraiser. The appraiser's client is the bank, the lender. What their responsibility is coming into a property and assessing it, condition, the market conditions, and comparing it to properties in the area to come up with an overall value for the property. Why is this important? I'll give you an example. Let's say that your buyer client makes an offer on a property and offers $300,000. What the appraiser does is those things that I spoke about. They come in, they look at the property, they look at the market conditions, they compare it to those in the area of similar shape, style, size, and they say whether or not this property is valued at $300,000. And if it is, fine. If it is not, the bank is not going to give a loan, is not going to finance a property that is not valued at the amount that they're lending the buyer. That's why it's important that the appraiser comes in and gives a fair assessment of the property for their client, who is the lending institution. The home inspector. A home inspector also comes in and evaluates the property, but from a different perspective, a different angle than what an appraiser does. The home inspector comes in and they're looking for basically structural soundness. They identify any repairs or placements. They do termite inspections. They test the water. They do radon tests. They do those types of things looking for soundness, safety issues, anything like that that can affect the condition of the home, and they prepare a report. The report is basically the buyer's first introduction to the property. They go through every nook and cranny of the home. The buyer should be present. during the home inspection, because if there's any questions about the property, a good inspector is going to be able to answer those. They'll tell you the age of the furnace, the windows, they'll make recommendations, they'll tell you things that are safety issues that should be done now versus things that, could use a little updating later. That is what the home inspector does. What the home inspector does not do is say, based on this report and the old windows and the busted pipes, the home is valued at this much. That is not what home inspectors do. They solely look at the condition of the home and prepare a report based on their findings of their inspection. That is it. The insurance agent, much like an agent that you go to for car insurance, this basically writes policies to protect the property in the event of any damage. So banks, lenders, they require buyers to have insurance on a property prior to closing. They want to make sure that from the very beginning that their property, their investment, the buyer's property is protected in the event that there's any loss or damage or anything to that property. So that's what the purpose of the insurance agent. They facilitate the transaction and getting insurance on the subject property. Surveyors. What surveyors do? Surveyors are typically involved in purchases of land, but a surveyor can come in and basically they assess property. They'll look at they give a legal description of the property, and they also tell where the exact boundaries are. Why is it important? If you buy a property, your buyer buys a property and, it says it's 5 acres, you want to know where your 5 acres start and stop. That's basically what a surveyor does. They assess the property, they give a description of the property, and they give the exact boundaries. That's what the surveyor's job is in a transaction if a surveyor is used. Some people get surveyors after the fact, before they put up a fence or something like that, just to ensure they're not putting a fence over on their neighbor's property line, things like that. But that's the surveyor's function. They come, they give a description, and map out boundaries. The title company basically protects the buyer and the sellers, the banks, and what they do is they come in and make sure that there's no adverse actions, and that when a title transfers from the seller to the buyer, that there's no liens, there's nothing going on, and also that the seller has a legal right to transfer the title. The seller has a legal right to to sell this property to whoever they're selling it to. That they do a title search, and they basically, anything that's about the property that's not known, it will come up. So you want to make sure that they check to make sure that prior to the title being transferred from one person to the other, that there's a clear title. If there's any liens, sometimes, the seller may have to take care of those liens, or sometimes they don't want to take care of them in some transactions, and they'll say, listen, we're selling it with the liens, and the buyer will be responsible for clearing those liens or fines or whatever it is. But that's what the title company's function is, to come in and uncover those things that may be swept underneath the carpet. A transaction broker, not all transactions use transaction brokers. Transaction brokers typically work together with the real estate agents, not so much directly with the buyers or the sellers, but they act kind of as the middle person with ensuring that things, in terms of the transaction, move smoothly. So it may be anything from, paperwork, preparing contracts, those types of things. And most times they are real estate professionals because they may have some duties that involve having a license, but that's what transaction brokers do. They kind of do some of the administrative stuff on behalf of either, the buyer side team or the seller side team. And that's what their role is, kind of facilitate the transaction. That's kind of what their title alludes to. This concludes our segment. As always, like, comment, and share. You can also reach out to us on www.KettishaWalkerRealty.com or Kettisha Walker Realty on all social media platforms.
Click the icon in the top left corner to be taken to Kettisha Walker Realty's page for the uncut full version of this training video and many others.